Hello, everyone. How was lunch? Good? Good, good. I haven't eaten yet, so good to know. I welcome you to the next session after lunch. We're going to talk about code reviews. And specifically, I want to talk to you about how to make them better. So, without further ado, who here has seen this emoji? Raise your hand. Yeah? Yeah? Who has given this emoji in a code review very quickly? Who has received this emoji in a code review? A little bit less, but yeah. When we see this particular emoji, it holds a very special connotation for us as developers, right? When you see this, you think of LGTM. Looks good to me. And this particular phrase, when it comes to software development, is it looks fine. It works. It's going to do the job that it's supposed to do. And depending on where you are on the spectrum of what this means to you, receiving an LGTM might be like, yes, I got it approved. My code review is going to go through. It's going to get merged. It's going to be deployed. And we're good to go. This is very sensitive. Move it away. If you're on the other end, you might receive this. Sometimes you receive a looks good to me too quickly after your pull request. It's maybe 5 minutes after, and you see this right away. You think, there's no way that somebody reviewed my pull request this quickly or this thoroughly. It could not have been a proper review. And by the end, and as you keep working and start going with more code reviews, you eventually get to this state where looks good to me is not really good. It's bare minimum. This is going to go and pass through, and we're probably going to come back to it because some things were not done the right way the first time. And so knowing this and understanding this, I now want to talk to you about code reviews and how to make them better. So we're first going to talk about what we are doing wrong, because there are a lot of things that we are doing wrong with code reviews today. Then we're going to talk about how we fix those things. We're going to go beyond bare minimum code reviews. So once I tell you what we're doing wrong and how to fix them, those are the bare minimum things, but we want to make them better. We want to not be good, we want to be great. And by the end, we're going to tie all of this back to some DORA metrics, which if you're unfamiliar with it, I'll go over them very quickly at the end. So what are we doing wrong? Well, in a code review, the very typical process is you have some code changes, somebody writes them, and you prepare them to be reviewed by someone else, ideally, not yourself. And that other person will then go through, inspect the code, and make sure that everything is good, everything is great, and that it can move on in your process. So we're going to look at this from two perspectives. We're going to look at it from the reviewer's perspective and the author's perspective. And we'll start with the reviewer, because once we get to the author, us, the ones that write the code and open the pull requests, we have a lot to work on. So the first thing reviewers are doing wrong now is not leaving your ego at the door. As a reviewer, you set the tone for the code review. It's you who has a lot of leverage. People are putting up their code changes to you to ideally get approved, so they're waiting for that approval from you. If you decide to send back some comments or some feedback or some suggestions, you might have to cause additional work for the author, depending on what those comments are. So you have a lot of leverage as a reviewer. And understanding that, some people take advantage of that. Why are you doing this? You are only a junior developer, so you should have done it this particular way. We introduced the ego. We kind of let the leverage get to our head, and that's something that is a very detrimental part in our code reviews. Alongside with that is focusing on the developer rather than the code. Yes, code reviews are written by someone else, but when you start writing these comments and you start giving suggestions back or asking for changes, sometimes we tend to focus on the person who wrote them rather than the objective code that is in front of you. And this is something that is very detrimental to the team as a whole. In fact, it's not just me saying that, and it's not just that feeling that you get that it's kind of right. In a study done by a group of researchers at Carnegie Mellon and Google, they explored whether or not there were patterns in code reviews, and they labeled comments if they were toxic or non-toxic. What they found in this research is that the use of second-person pronouns at the beginning of the sentence is more likely to be impolite. So some of the examples that they showed there were, you wanted to be part of this project, or you decided not to follow the code of conduct, or you decided not to take part in this particular task. When you focus on the dev, that's when things are labeled toxic. And that is something that we need to be mindful of, but is something that we are currently doing wrong as reviewers. Next, we have skimming through reviews. Who here has received a really, really long review and they're just like, yeah, I think it's good, approve? It's gonna be higher than that. It's 500 files, 1,027 lines of code changed. You're gonna approve that very, very quickly. And the reason that we skim through reviews is that sometimes they're really large. No one's going to really thoroughly look at those pull requests that are too many files or too many lines of code. Other times you're at the end of your sprint, or you're near your vacation, or you just want to get it done. You're at the end of the week. You don't want to hold your team back, and so you think, oh, I'm just this one, so I'm gonna let it through. It's going to be fine. Then sometimes there are more nuanced reasons why you skim through reviews as a reviewer. Sometimes you're just burnt out. You don't care. You have a bunch of pull requests waiting for your review. Maybe you're the principal engineer or the only developer that is the one that is assigned to all of the pull requests. These are things that could contribute to you just saying, forget it. I'm just gonna quickly go through. I trust in this developer. It's gonna go through. The funny thing is, when we do that, when we let it slide, when we let those changes go through and get merged and deployed, and we say, looks good to me, it's fine. The moment something happens in production and there is a fire, there is an emergency, we are super quick to say, it's the developer's fault. There was a bug in their code. But the thing is, that's the completely wrong mindset. We're quick to blame the other person, but the right mindset is, how did I miss that? Because you as a reviewer have a responsibility to also look at the code that is passing through your review. So skimming through reviews and the consequences of skimming through reviews are something that is very much wrong with what we are doing right now in code reviews. And finally, the most relevant part or most poignant part that a lot of developers feel about what reviewers are doing wrong is writing ineffective comments. So ineffective comments can take the form of a bunch of different ways, but most of the ones that we see are either subjective, so return that result in the form of an array instead. And that's it, that's all they write. There's no reasoning, there's no rhyme, they just say, do it this particular way. And when you don't provide a reason why, you have no point or you have no choice but to take it at face value. So it's very likely that the author who's going to read your comment is going to say, no, that's pretty subjective. Why should I do it in this way? Sometimes comments are unclear. This could be better. How? Do you want me to do something about it? Is it good enough? Is it something that needs to be changed before you're going to give me an approval? What is it? It's unclear what you want me to do. Do I need to work on it or not? Is this just a nitpick? And finally, they lack an outcome. So you see comments like this where, I think there's something wrong here. Okay, what am I supposed to do with that comment? Do I need to rework it? Do I need to refactor it? Do I need to rename something? Do I need to consolidate some things? What is the problem? Let me know. And so having subjective, unclear, and outcome-less comments are ineffective comments that the author can do nothing with. So as reviewers, these are all of the things that we are doing wrong. We are not leaving our ego at the door. We are focusing on the developer rather than the code. We are skimming through reviews. I am guilty of that myself in the beginning and sometimes now, trying to do better. and writing ineffective comments. Now we take a look at the author. Who here writes code and puts it up in a PR to be reviewed? Through some kind of tool, GitHub, Bitbucket, code commit. Okay, so that is usually the majority. And this is going to focus a lot on that particular type of review, even though pair programming or mob programming is a form of code review, but we'll focus on that. So as an author, the first thing that we are doing wrong is not being your own first reviewer. We should be looking at our code before we send it up to be submitted in a pull request. We tend to catch little typos. We tend to see missing parts in our description. This is an opportunity for us to get all of the context in our head out and put it into the pull request so that whoever is reviewing our pull request will be able to make sense of it. But we don't do that. A lot of us just kind of say, let me submit it and let the reviewer take care of it. Another thing, we are not using any automation during development or not making very good use of it. And when I say automation, what I mean is linting, formatting, static analysis, testing. So linting considers how our code syntactically behaves. If you ever use ESLint, it kind of flags these kind of errors in your JavaScript if you're using it for JavaScript, which is the most popular, how I've used it. And it finds code smells like undeclared variables or finding awaits in loops. If you don't use any kind of automated formatting, that's where you get into code review discussions that go on and on and on, where you might say indentation, space. You're missing a line break in between the logic here. When you declare a new variable, you're supposed to have 2 spaces. Whatever it is that your team has decided are the proper styling rules, you don't make use of it if you are commenting on it in a code review and fixing it at the code review. You should be fixing it during development. Static analysis goes deeper than linting. It finds a lot of complex issues that may not be found through linting, and is another form of check for yourself to be able to fix anything before the pull request and the code review. And finally, running any test suites. These are all things that should be done by us. There's so many tools out there, and we have so much automation available at our disposal. It would be a shame not to use it to help us, not only us, but to also set up the reviewer for success so that your code review is actually done properly. And as authors, we make our PRs very unmanageable. So we alluded to this. Who's seen this tweet? Yeah? It's true. This is the reason why, on the reviewer's perspective, we skim reviews, because the pull request that we receive is unmanageable. There's no way we're going to review a pull request that's 500 lines of code. So this is something that we need to be mindful of. And making your PR unmanageable is not just lines of code. Sometimes it's too many files, which is a part of that. Sometimes your changes aren't atomic. You have several things happening in there. You have random configuration file changes in there. You have your last git stash that you just popped and have added in there. There's a bunch of things that are part of the PR that are not focused on the actual singular feature or fix or thing you want the reviewer to look at. And so that makes it a bit harder for the reviewer to review. And sometimes you might have multiple parts of a large feature in a single PR. So that again makes the pull request much, much larger, much more unmanageable for the person who's about to receive it and go through it. Alongside with that, we treat PRs as a burden. We open a PR, we call it a day. All of the things that are necessary to make that PR successful, making sure we have a great title, making sure that all of the context and nuance that's in our heads is actually placed into that pull request, linking work items, having documentation, all of these things sound like work. And we treat having really detailed and context-filled pull requests like documentation or unit tests. We don't like them. We have this stereotype about them that we don't like doing them, and that it's something that's a nice to have, but not necessarily something we have to do. But we shouldn't be treating them as a burden. We should be doing more than that because it is our job. With that, we get things like this. Non-descriptive title, no description, no labels, nothing there to help me. If you got this as a reviewer, I wouldn't, okay, what kind of bug fix? Which bug fix? This is what the reviewer sees when you treat a PR as a burden. And finally, the one thing that we do as authors, and it's still very hard to shake, is tying your worth to your code. Every time we look at the code that we write, we kind of have a piece of ourselves there, right? We feel like it's an extension of who we are or how good we are at our job. And sometimes, even if we receive feedback, even if it is constructive feedback, we tend to feel like we're not worth it or we're not good at our job. And so this is something that is very, very key to us doing things wrong in a code review, is tying our worth to our code, because that sets the foundation for being tense with the reviewer when it's not meant to be that way. So as an author, we do all of these things wrong. We don't review our code first. We make our PRs unmanageable. We do not use any automation or don't make great use of it during development and fix things beforehand. And we treat PRs as a burden, and we tie our worth to our code. So how do we fix all of these things? As a quick refresher for the reviewer, these are all the things we're doing wrong from the reviewer's perspective, the person who is looking at the code changes. And the first thing we need to do is obviously forget your ego. That doesn't matter here. Your job title doesn't matter here. Any personality traits that you don't like from your colleague don't matter here. Any internal squabbles that are happening in the company don't matter here. Focus on what is in front of you and forget everything about you that you might put into the code review that is subjective. Focus on the code, not the developer. So what we were doing wrong is sometimes calling out the developer, saying, why would you do it this way? Or why would you implement it in that way? Or this is stupid. Or in a hands-on table repo on GitHub, I really tried to find one, someone said that something looked like shit. Imagine if this was a person, a junior developer, or someone new to open source, and this was their first pull request. They're never going to contribute again if they receive a comment like that. So there are ways to be constructive without focusing on the person who wrote it. Again, on that same paper where they are detecting interpersonal conflict and issues in code review, there is a point here that says, we see many software engineering related engrams, words in the comments, like tests or in the poll, among non-toxic comments, but almost none among non-toxic comments, or toxic comments, excuse me. And what this means is if you just focus on the technical discussion, if you have your comments focus on the code at hand, what is happening, what the logic is, what is going on there, rather than the developer, you're more likely to have your comment be not toxic and have a more productive discussion because of it. When you write yourself a comment, sometimes you might think, this might be misconstrued. That's a good thing to tune into. You should ask yourself some questions when you write a comment, especially when you work on a global team. Ask yourself, does it mention the person a bit more than the code? Because if it does, you might need to reframe your comment. Is the overall feeling combative or aggressive or passive-aggressive? Does it have this way about it that just doesn't sound right? Maybe you need to reword it in a better way so it's not unclear and ambiguous. Does the comment actually add value? Is what you're saying going to lead to a productive discussion? Or are you just venting? Those are the comments that you need to watch out for and see if it adds value or not to the code review. And can any parts of your comment be lost in translation? So for example, in America, there are a lot of people who use analogies like, with football, American football, right? Here, football is not American football. Here, it is soccer. So when you use these kinds of analogies or you use these kinds of synonyms, be very careful because it might not come across the way that you intend to. Or it may not even apply to the people that are on your team if they are on a global team. And finally, does the comment actually contribute to or counteract developer happiness? At the end, that is what you need to look at when you are writing comments. Next, as a reviewer, you need to have proper, thorough reviews. So these are very quick guidelines. They're not hard to follow, set rules in law, but for us to make it a bit more manageable for ourselves, reviewing code in shorter bursts, this is just a guideline of 25 to 45 minutes, allows you to actually slowly, properly, thoroughly go through a code review. And the reason that it's in this time range is because after that point, we tend to get more distracted, we lose focus more easily, there's no way we're gonna give our code review a proper review. And don't be afraid to send PRs back that are too large to review. That is very valid for you to send it back and ask the author, hey, you need to go back to your responsibilities and the contract that we're following for our code review. You need to make sure this is manageable for me and for you. Do what's necessary to obtain the full context of the code changes. If you need to have an offline discussion with the author, have that offline discussion. Don't just put it to the side or don't just approve it and think, oh, it's probably good. Get the full context that you need so that you can give a proper review. And write effective comments. So to me, effective comments are objective, they're as specific as possible, and they have a focused outcome. So as reviewers, being objective is key. Being objective means you suggest with facts. Remember the last one where we said, oh, can you return the result as an array? Give me a reason why I need to return it as an array. Before you ask for a change, ask yourself, why do you want to make that change? Because doing this thought experiment makes you able to have a more coherent comment to your author. If you yourself understand why you want to make that change, you're better able to communicate and write that reason in a comment and give it to the author to then take care of. And target the code as presented to you. Look at everything that is in the pull request and review it like that. As reviewers, we need to be specific. Specific means be clear if something needs to actually be done. When I receive a pull request and I see comments on it, I immediately assume that each comment has work tied to it. But that's not always the case. Some are informational comments, some are suggestions that don't need action by me. Not all of it has to have work. And so we already do one of this, which is nitpicks. If you use nitpicks in comments saying, this is just a nitpick, we kind of all understand, that's just a personal preference of mine. You shouldn't really be writing nitpicks at all, but be clear if it is a nitpick. But other things that you can write to immediately signal in a comment, hey, this needs a change, or hey, this needs rework, let's discuss this offline. Being able to tell the author immediately what the comment is about is going to help them focus their mindset on what needs to be done. And then pinpoint exactly what you're talking about. Sometimes I see files where the entire code diff is highlighted and they ask me to change something. Only highlight the relevant code that's being discussed. Only explicitly call out the method or the variable or the class name that you are talking about. And if necessary, because most tools already do this, but if you don't have highlighting or don't have this type of way to communicate and pinpoint, call out the line numbers to be more succinct. The more narrow that you can make your comment, the better for the author. And finally, as reviewers, we need to have a focused outcome. So in a different paper called Code Review Comments, Language Matters, these researchers found that the most useful comments contain verbs that denote some kind of transformation. So with this, I say use the triple R pattern. When you write a comment that you're going to ask for a request, or when you are asking the author to make a change, do the 3 R's when you write the comment. What is your request? What is the rationale behind it? And what is the result? So the request is a sentence explaining what you'd like the author to do. The rationale justifies what it is you're trying to do. And the result is something measurable that the author can compare to. What does the end state look like? It's a screenshot of what you want it to be. It is a link to a metric, or it's a metric that they're trying to attain. It's maybe sometimes it's even what the code is supposed to look like right after the change. And so I'm running low on time, but I'm going to go through this one really quick. For example, if you want someone to split a feature and create a separate PR, using the triple R pattern, you could say, could you separate the sorting behavior into its own PR? I'm having trouble reviewing because there's both sorting and filtering behavior in this single PR. Moving it into its own PR helps me isolate these changes and better review it. And so the result that you're asking for is separating the filtering behavior from the sorting behavior into their own PR. So these are all the things we need to do. And we're going to go really quick here. Authors, you need to be your own first reviewer. Anticipate the comments and the questions that your reviewer is going to have, and jot down all of the context as much as possible for your reviewer. Make your PRs manageable. Manageable PRs, they focus on a single change. They only include what's necessary for the code to work. You split multiple parts into multiple reviews. They can likely be reviewed within 10 to 20 minutes. They are typically under 500 lines of code based on a study by Dragan Stepanovic, who is a principal engineer at a company I'm forgetting. And they're typically less than 20 files change based on a study from Microsoft. And let the robots take over during development. Use those tools at your disposal and fix everything during development as much as possible before the PR. And then prime your PRs. It is your job. There's a quote here that says, when one is writing a letter, he should think that the recipient will make it into a hanging scroll. That's from Yamamoto Tsunotomo from Hagakure, the Book of Samurai. And this is exactly what I mean by priming your PRs. Add all of the context possible. Make the reviewer feel so clear that they understand what it is that they are reviewing, and make it so pristine that it can even act as a reference or a historical record when you're looking back on your code and if you need to look back on it. This is from my book, which talks about having all the pieces of having your PR primed. And finally, remind yourself, you are not your code. At the end of the day, we are going to make mistakes. We're going to be better if we get constructive feedback. We are not our code. We're more than that. So try to remember that when you are having a code review and you are receiving lots of comments. So if you want more, can I keep going? I don't want to go across for the other author. I'm going to go very quick because these are a few more slides. So going beyond bare minimum, because everything I've spoken about is the bare minimum for us to have proper code reviews. But create a team working agreement. So all of these things that I've said, all of your coding conventions, all of your team rules about how your code review is supposed to be, put them into a document that you are all going to agree to enforce. If possible, use PR templates. Help the author not forget what they're supposed to add whenever they open a pull request. And also, if possible, auto-assign reviewers. Take out the bias and use something like a code owner's file in GitHub, where depending on what part of the code base is changed, a specific developer can be auto-assigned to a review. And explore something like informational reviewers. So something that is missed in code reviews is that we tend to only give it to people who can contribute or who have enough experience to review it properly. But if we only do that time and time again, the rest of the team is never going to get skilled up with you. So explore the thought of informational reviewers, where you add other people on your team to be aware and apprised of the changes that are happening. And you don't necessarily need their approval to have it go through, but you do have some acknowledgement that they've looked at it, and they are now having that knowledge transfer go to the rest of the team. And if you continue to do this, then you have the whole team skill up together, and then they will be able to be contributing people who have an approval. And code compliments are encouraged within reason. So if you do find something that you like, say so. But don't do it for every single thing. Do it for something really novel. Do it for something you've never seen before, some very clever implementation of a hard problem. Say something, because code reviews should not all be about negative things or feedback that is just critique. And how we tie this all to the Dora metrics, Google and DevOps research and assessment team is, they have been doing this report where they study how software development teams are performing. And everybody gets upset about this page, page 11. because they have come up with these metrics. These metrics very quickly are deployment frequency. How often do you deploy to prod? Lead time for changes. How long from code commit to code in production? Time to restore service. How quickly can you fix a production fire? And then finally, the change failure rate. What percentage of deployed changes cause production fires? So depending on where you are, typically the higher you are on some of these, and with the exception of deployment frequency, if you don't deploy as often and you're high on all the other things, you're a low-performing team. Otherwise, if you deploy more frequently and you are quicker to have all of these things, then you're a high-performing team. And so the only thing that matters here with code reviews is that when you deploy more frequently, sometimes people don't want to do code reviews because it interferes with how quickly you're going to deploy. Other times, they cite code reviews as being a negative impact on this particular metric because the longer code reviews are, the longer it's going to take for those changes to end up in production. And then the time to restore service. The idea is code reviews done correctly will not affect this as much. And then finally, the most relevant one, change failure rate. If you do code reviews, you should find more things that automated things cannot, because humans understand nuance, humans understand quirks, and they understand decision history. So the more that you're able to transfer knowledge through code reviews, the less likely your change failure rate should go up. But what I will finally end with is that even though there are all these metrics, don't let these metrics convince you to cut corners on code reviews. Code reviews are here to stay, and together we can make them great. So that was everything. There's a lot more. I'm writing a book on this. That's why I have so much to share about it. But if you are interested, please check it out. And Falafam, thank you, and thank you for staying a little bit over.